Yeah, for example, here's an example. If Pluto is right at the stationary retrograde point, am I doing this right? Yeah, okay. So Pluto's right at the stationary retrograde point. Regress Mars comes up, comes up, comes up, it goes out, it comes up right onto this, right on to touch the Pluto. So it can be conjunct to Pluto, or square it, or opposed it. But it's right at that point. It's going to be within a degree. It's going to be in critical relationship to the Pluto for 25 years. And you're going to have a very confronting or somewhat harsh circumstances around getting things done and doing things. There'll be some blocks, some struggles, some oppression, some conflict in your life. Now, you can make it dramatic thinking politically, but it can just be having a dominant older brother or parent that's violent, or it could be, an oppressive relationship, or it could be you being the oppressive one. It's very difficult to, with Mars, if you see an aggressive element, it's very difficult to ascertain whether you're dishing that aggression out or whether it's happening to you. Okay, so here's a putting out energy or taking them in. That's a part of the pulsing of the Mars cycle. When you want to see this in a person's chart, this is where the I Ching comes in very useful. Each line of the I Ching is a degree of the zodiac. And each degree of each line is either active or passive, solid or broken, an active or a passive line in place. One happens to being creative, one happens to reflecting and going in, trying to understand and be open. So when a planet's in a degree, especially if it's in a degree for 25 years, it's going to be either active or passive, according to the line of the I Ching. And you're either going to dish it out or it's going to come back at you. So you have this information. We probably talked about this when we were looking it up in the natal chart in the level 8 with the I Ching to the natal chart. But you can see if your sun's active or passive, or you can see the natal chart factors are factors that put up how much action or reflection, how much receptivity, how much creativity is accentuated. But when you see the progressions, you're seeing very specific things. You have your basic attitude. So if you have a passive Mars to start with, when it comes up, the progressions are going to encourage it to be more passive or more active, even though it's being essentially passive. It's going to push, it's going to bounce and push those perimeters. So if you have an active Mars, whenever active, you're going to act more. When it's passive, you're going to be passive more. Like, you're just going to see these themes, but you'll see it in the circumstances and the relationships and what you're doing and what work you have and how you're doing with things as textures in your life. Now, when we get to progressions, almost every aspect can work, but I've just been concentrating on the strong ones here, but still, we'll come to that. But this point of coming up to when it's right at the retrograde, if Mars is conjunct, square, opposed to Pluto in your chart, okay, you got that natally, but suppose it's just 7 degrees away. Across 40, 45 years, you could build up that crisis to make that aspect play out in your life and become its extreme, and then you're recovering from it for the next 25 years, or 30 years, or 40 years. Wow. That could be having kids and being stuck with the kids until they're finally done and you can get on with your life. Maybe having to do everything with a deadbeat partner, or not doing it, or you're the deadbeat that's not doing anything against the demands of a partner, job, or circumstances. Okay. Now here's an example where Pluto is a degree away from the retrograde point, the stationary retrograde point. But a degree away means within that 25 years of Pluto going up to retrograde and coming back, coming up to go to stationary retrograde, then going retrograde, that's 25 years that this is within 1 degree. Okay, that's on one side of it, but there's a degree before this and after this one, coming into and going away from the Pluto aspect, which is you add another 10 years for that next degree. or not 8 or 10 years for the next degree, and you're talking about into 40 years with everything within that one degree, and the whole life could be built up to the extreme and coming away from it. Or in this case, it would build up, have an extreme, then you seem to get past it. Just when you're about to get past it, it goes back. Oh my goodness. And you have to, this confrontation comes again. So you can be blowing up and get mad at your parents and have your kid get out, have your kids come back, and then your kids are blowing up and mad at you. Now, we'll just take Pluto as an example. It could be Neptune, it could be spaced out, it could be shock and excitement, accident prone Mars, it could be Saturn, it could be any planet. And Mars is going to accentuate, the progressed Mars is going to add this attitude and add this energy and energize the inwardness of the planet. Energize it to, you got to do this, you got to do this, encouraging it to go this way. And you begin to see the texture of this by the planet. Okay. Here's another case. I'm just some examples that we're thinking about. It's moving a certain amount, but it has this process. One is going, here's, if someone had their Pluto here, Mars comes along and it's going to, at some point, it would come up to hit the Pluto. Say it hit it here. Then it's going to be 10 years going into this. It's 25 years in here, 10 years coming out of this. So you're talking 45 years. It goes forward and you get past that, you go forward. 45 years later, you come back and you got the same thing happening. We're messed up because our parents did it to us, or like, it's just, we can think of it so many different ways, but boy, we run into similar blocks or similar challenges to our energy. It's difficult to see progressions when you're younger. They begin to seem apparent once you get older. You get past 45, you begin to start seeing it because you're looking at the last half of your life and you have the first half in front of you. You begin to observe it a little bit. You say, oh, look at that. Oh, look at that. You begin to see it. Oh, and then you begin to see, oh, it's still a puzzle for what you deal with, what's now, what's going forward. But you can certainly see the continuity of it more as you're looking back up till now. Okay, let's see here. Yeah, if it were another planet, if Mars were hitting Venus, totally different thing than the Mars to the Pluto, which is a confrontation. Here, Mars is going to push your desires, is going to push what you want, and it might be a very seductive time period in your life, or a very indulgent or passionate time, or really where your attitude is pushing for what you want. And you may be getting it more and pushing it more, and then it passes on, goes along, and then goes so far and then backs up. And you have to come back and be able to get 45 years later. Well, when you're 20, you can have a certain amount of passions. When you're 65, it's not the same thing, but the same energy would be happening. It's like something, it's not, that's only if you were born before this happened. You could be born halfway through this and not have experienced the first half. That may have been something during your mother's pregnancy that came up, 20 days, 30 days before you were born. And then you're born, and then 20, 30 days later, there's a confrontation, something to do with mom or somebody else, and then, but it plays out in years of your life. So yeah, here again, I put if the Mars were close, just not exactly, it was just within a degree of that stationary retrograde period, it would be the degree before that time period and the degree after. It's still a 35-year cycle with Mars within the degree of Venus, where you're pushing for what you want, where your desires are going to be, pushed. If they're wrong, they're going to be your envies or your lust or the anger, or you're going to push things too much. You'll be more aggressive. You'll be the dominant partner, or perhaps a dominated partner. Just another example. I'm just trying to the visualization of this, seeing this, it takes time to reflect what it is in. But suppose this is your ascendant, and the Mars is going along, and suddenly it's slowing down. It's not quite at stationary. It's a degree from stationary direct, but it's your ascendant's there. So it's been in the 12th house all your life, and suddenly it goes into the first house, and you just get it going for about a year. But that one period is still going to be 13, 14 years, and then just you get out, and there's another 12, 13 years backing up where you had this Mars in the first house conjunct the ascendant. Wow! And then it backs up into the 12th house again. What did I do? Simple movement, tremendous implications and repercussions of these movements. So you're your own first guinea pig in working with progressions, but it's useful to have a brother, sister, mother, father, a few other people you know deeply or closely, your kids, partner, and you keep an eye on their progressions. You sort of you're seeing their life story. And in the transits, you're acting it out. With the progressions, you're seeing the inner part evolve, the source of things. Yeah, so if the ascendant were right at the stationary retrograde point, and your Mars is coming along to that, you come up right up to the ascendant and not even go into the first house, and could back up and never quite you almost get to it in your first house, and it doesn't come there, it comes back. Well, it's a dramatic thing to say, but when you're living it over 25 years and you're expecting it to be there, it's going to bring, and then it doesn't quite, but wow. One day I'll get my own job. One day I'll get my own job. Oh no, I have a kid. It's a bit. I better back. Like so many different changes can happen through this. You have to observe. You wouldn't be able to. You can see the timing. You wouldn't say, "Oh, you're going to go through it." You wouldn't be predicting someone around it. You'd have to be sensitively looking at complexes or patterns that are established in a person and try to figure out where they are. Where's the turning points? When is it going to turn around? When they're going to get out of something? This is when this becomes really incredibly useful when dealing with therapy, or you're dealing with special needs, things like that. Even everybody, we all have our special needs at different times. So like you see these phases come out, they're important to know.